Right now we're on the shelf for $120, and and it's not because we think we are some really high end luxury brand that is only marketing itself to the elites of the world. It really is because the labor and production cost is so high. A couple Google searches later, I ended up finding Craig Reynolds, kind of like the godfather of California agave. We connected over the phone. I was then invited to one of their agave harvests. Now, every time we come out with a product, with a batch of Jano, we could see it being out of the distributor's hands or our hands in 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, it's out there. People are buying it. People sell out relatively quickly.
So my last question, so tell us, what has been your recipe to revenue for your business in this venture?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm still figuring it out, but I think the path to revenue is
Welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I am here today with Gian Nelson of Jano Spirits. Gian, thank you for joining me. It's so good to
Leah,
see
thanks
you.
for having me.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have you share your story today because you have a unique product. You're in the agave world, but not the normal one that everybody thinks of in Mexico because you're based out in California. So tell us how you got Jano started and kind of where this idea
Yeah,
came
exactly. So Jano Spirits, we started in 2021 with the kind of idea of wanting to make California agave spirits. And honestly, we had no idea how we were going to do that. The first kind of idea was, it kind of conceptualized out of working at a distillery, seeing a lot of different brand owners in the market. We were doing a lot of contract work at that time, and just kind of seeing like, okay, like what would it take if I wanted to do like my own brand? And so I kind of just started kind of, looking at those routes to take, also looking at what was in the market that would be interesting for me to make because, entrepreneurship needs a lot of passion behind it and a lot of energy. And so I really wanted to kind of look, and agave really interested me at that point because there wasn't a lot of what do you call it? Like it was tequila and mezcal, and at that time, mezcal was just kind of starting to, start riding its wave as we're seeing now. And so I thought for a second, well, is anyone doing that up here in the United States? And so a couple Google searches later, I ended up finding Craig Reynolds, kind of like the godfather of California agave. We connected over the phone. I was then invited to one of their agave harvests in Yolo County, and I just immediately fell in love. And I told myself that was exactly what I wanted to do. And then it was like, well, how do you do that? So it was like, well, I want to get those agaves. And so at that point, I've told this story 100 times, but basically it came down to, well, you're going to have to get on the waiting list to get these agaves because there weren't that many. But he did know of a family down the road that had these agave Americanas that were that might be available, but they weren't as sought after as like the Tequilania Blue Weber agaves, just because of the sugar content, the namesake and all that. And I don't know, kind of felt like we were up to for a challenge. And so we ended up meeting Henry and his family, and I think the story just kind of grew from there, because the deeper we looked into the agave Americanas, the more we realized that there were native U.S. agave species. And what a great history it has with pre-Columbian indigenous people, how they've been here for generations, and so we just really wanted to kind of pursue that. And so,
Mhm.
we've done multiple batches with the Agave Americana with different farmers and just trying to tell that story. But yeah, that's it in a
Yeah.
nutshell.
Yeah. So that original, tip to go down the road to the other farm, what were they doing with the agave? Were they making mezcal out of it at that point?
Not at
That
that point.
family?
Actually, they were planning it originally to make pulque, another beverage made out of agave. But instead of
Mhm.
roasting or harvesting, roasting, fermenting, distilling an agave. Pulque is almost like milking an agave. So they would take the
Mhm.
sap from the agave that had sugar, do a fermentation with that, and it was kind of like the world's kind of first low alc beverage, and so
Yeah.
it's really prevalent
Yeah.
with indigenous communities, rural communities in Mexico,
Uh-huh.
and so agave americanas and other large agaves that are kind of in their own class they call pulqueros. And so
Mhm.
that's originally why they grew those. But unfortunately, Henry's father passed away before they were ready for making pulque. And so
Mhm.
Henry and their family kind of offered them to us to kind of work with to make a
Mm.
spirit out of instead of a pulque. And so we had a really
Okay.
great,
Yeah.
sentimental, moment about that because we were
Yeah.
fulfilling, maybe not exactly their dream, but we were helping them, see something.
Right. You're helping something come to fruition
Exactly,
from it though.
exactly.
Yeah. So is it about 20 years for them to grow to before they can be
Yeah, it really depends. I mean,
harvested?
that's the whole thing is a lot of what we know is based on what we see in Mexico, right? So an average
Yeah.
life cycle of a blue Weber in Mexico is about 7 years. But
Mhm.
but we've seen anything between 5 years and 20 years up here. And so it really depends, I think, on a lot
Mhm.
of variables with climate condition, upkeep of
Yeah.
the agave. Are they getting irrigated? Are they not getting irrigated? Weed pressure, just so many different things, soils.
Sure.
Yeah, so we've kind of seen it all up here.
Yeah. So on the business side of it, when your business partner is Mother Nature, and how do you manage that to make sure that you can grow a sustainable
Well,
business?
I think the interesting part is for us, it's such a passion project, and it really to us right now is still pretty much a proof of concept kind of business.
Mhm.
This is more about whether we can see if a California agave spirits company can come into fruition, um,
Yeah.
and how sustainable is it now versus how it can be in the near future. And it doesn't
Mhm.
help that we went the hardest path by finding these non sought after agaves and
Yeah.
sticking to our integrity about the only using U.S. native agaves, things like that. But I think
Mhm.
by holding so true to the integrity of the brand, I think helps people understand that like we're here for the right purpose. Like we're not here to exploit any
Mhm.
kind of niche or hole that's missing in the agave sector, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, for us that's been very key. Like we all have full-time jobs, we're all contributing
Mhm.
to this agave project, and I think
Yeah.
now that the category of California agave spirit is rising, and also the interest of domestic
Mhm.
agave production, we're hopefully in a really great position to be on the
Mhm.
forefront and really blazing that trail for us in California to not only increase our production and awareness of the spirit, but then hopefully the demand will
Mhm.
come later with that.
Right. And what is it? So you mentioned earlier about sugar content. So is the American agave more or less? How does it taste different than other
Yeah, so
varieties?
the agave americana has its own flavor profile. It's obviously the same agave species, so it's not apples to oranges. It's
Mhm.
just maybe a different type of apple as to maybe the blue Weber. And
Mhm.
so I really love I personally really love the flavor profile because it has a little bit more richness on the palate, and
Mhm.
because our methods are very similar to the mezcal style you see in Mexico, where we're roasting them in earthen pits and doing some natural fermentations. I think the complexity is there with a little bit of that roasted smokiness, the natural fermentation, obviously, and
Yeah.
so the biggest compliment we've ever gotten has been able to be in a mezcal lineup, and people
Hmm.
not directly calling that out, saying and saying, oh, is that mezcal? And it's like, man, if you even questioned if it was mezcal, like that to us is the highest compliment. We received
Yeah.
gold medals from San Francisco wine and spirits competition, other medals as well. So
Hmm.
so the quality and integrity have to be there with the brand.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely people out there, they're giving you their endorsement that this is that they
Yeah.
like it. So that's a great
Yeah.
accomplishment. So tell us a little bit more about this the fermentation process and the how you put them in the pit and all that. So and how you do differently than anybody else
Yeah,
out
no,
there.
the harvest all the way, from field to glass, I guess, is really similar,
Mhm.
like I said, to making a traditional or ancestral mezcal. I mean, I think that the biggest difference with maybe other brands or other kind of craft distilleries is that we're actually the ones in the field helping the whole process, go
Mhm.
through. So, traditionally in like American craft distilling, you're going to get a bag, a syrup, a sack of whatever raw
Mhm.
material you're going to use. You do your processing, your fermentation, distilling, and out comes your product, whether it's whiskey, gin, brandies, rums, whatever. But us, it's almost more similar to wine, where the ones in the field
Mhm.
harvesting the agaves with the farmer. We're the ones that are setting up the cook with the owner of the pit. So we're involved
Mhm.
in that process. After our 5 to 6 days in the earthen pit, we're shredding and going into fermentation. Fermentation can last anywhere
Mhm.
between a week or two, just depending on season and temperatures, things like that.
Okay.
And then after we do our double distillation, and we usually let the spirit rest for about 6 weeks before it's proofed and bottled. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward process. Nothing you wouldn't see out of a video on how they make mezcal down south. But I think the difference is the other difference too, though, is that we've had to kind of what do you like almost alter equipment because we don't have
Mhm.
the equipment that they do in Mexico, right? So a lot of
Yeah.
times you go down to Mexico, you'll see specialized stores and
Mhm.
companies that specialize in agave processing, and we don't have anything like that up here. So a lot of us here in
Yeah.
California and other producers have had to kind of take what we have up here and kind of improvise.
Get a little
Exactly.
creative.
So, even the way that we shred agave is not the way that they do it out there, but we found a system that works really well for us that gets the job done. So we can go ahead
Mhm.
and get into our fermentation. But yeah, there's nothing really, revolutionary about that part, but because it's never really
Mhm.
been done up here before, it's very brand new to us. It's very,
Yeah.
it's not as locked in as it is at maybe a big agave production facility in Mexico.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and you don't have the, hundreds of year history of doing it there either. So it's not kind of ingrained in the local California culture
Yeah,
yet.
exactly.
So, did you go to Mexico to learn this process, or did you rely on your business partners to teach you how to do all this?
No, actually, my business partners and I have very similar backgrounds. We all came from
Hmm.
basically wine
Hmm.
industry here in California. There's
Yeah.
two of us that are Mexican Americans, so there.
Hmm.
I think for us, it was more about what the cultural reason or meaning behind this was going to be. I think growing up in
Hmm.
Mexico like I did, and my other partner as well, having a very big Mexican family, agave was just always kind of around us. Like we didn't really notice
Yeah.
it, and especially like growing up in Southern California as well, they're just everywhere. They're at the
Hmm.
at the grocery store parking lot. They're in everyone's,
Yeah.
front yard. Is just something that was kind of ingrained from us from a young age. And so, no one really ever taught us, but because we had this wine background as well, on top of our distilling
Mhm.
background, I think we have a, expertise in, or at least some experience in the fermentation side, which is the most, in my opinion, some of the most
Mhm.
volatile parts of the process. Because honestly, at the
Right.
end of the day, the distilling part almost feels like the easiest, or maybe just the more
Mhm.
straightforward way of part of the process, because the sugars have to be right in the field. So it's just like wine, where you have to pick at a certain bricks.
Right.
The cooking isn't always straightforward, because the size, the tonnage is all so different. The fermentations can be one of a or not one of a kind, but definitely volatile because of the conditions from the outside.
Mhm.
And then so finally, if you get a good fermentation and you finally get it to the still, it's almost like, oh my God, I made it. Thank God. Now all
Yeah.
I got to do is boil this off and make the spirit. It's a little
Right.
facetious, but it can definitely feel like that after 3 weeks in a row of processing.
Mhm. Right, yeah, yeah. You've been doing the marathon for up to that point. Now you can kinda walk the last couple of, steps,
Exactly.
and you know you'll get there. So, so how is, so obviously you came from the wine background, and I believe you still work in the wine industry as well and consult in wine. So how are the two industries similar and different for you, being kind of in between
Oh, it's
both?
such a great question, because that is exactly why I love being in agave. On the wine
Mhm.
side, I got into spirits, or I got into wine before spirits, and so just the relationship in wine that it has to its terroir, is the right word. Its
Mhm.
connection to the land was something really
Yeah.
inspiring to me. It's translated to a lot of my personal life. I love being outdoors.
Mhm.
Hiking, camping, fishing, hunting, like it's all a big part of our family's background. So wine just made a lot of sense, with that relation back to it.
Mhm.
And so spending my years in the vineyards, working in the cellars, working in tasting rooms, being a sommelier, all these things in wine.
Mhm.
With agave, it translated back because agaves are the expression of their land. They
Mhm.
are aging there for 7 to 20 years, absorbing all of the minerals, all of the water, all of the conditions,
Mhm.
all of the it's expression of the land. And so when it's your
Right.
time to harvest it, it's almost like you're taking that same relation as to a grape, as it's doing the same thing. It's just doing it every year.
Sure.
um, and then on the distillation side, it really inspires me to be able to help kind of push a new category, and to not a category
Mhm.
as well, but to a community here in California that I feel like our brand is very tied to the California identity and culture that we have here. We're such a big melting pot.
Mhm.
We are progressive in many more ways than just politically. We a lot
Sure.
of us have a very like pioneering spirit. We're always trying to push the envelope
Yeah.
of what it is, right? And so with this new category, I feel like a lot of us in the community are just trying to excel it forward and try to create identity of our own.
Mhm.
So it's not a mimic of Mexico, or it's not
Right.
that we're kind of paving our own way. And so when you just add all of that together, I feel like it's just like this perfect harmony. And then kind of on the
Mhm.
back end of things, it's been really interesting because it's helped me kind of get into the tequila and mezcal community as well, because I'm one of
Mhm.
the few gringos that are are capable of making an agave spirit from the raw material, right? And so having that
Yeah.
expertise has helped me consult with other brands on the technical aspects of agave production. And that's opened the door to helping tequila and mezcal brands, have some representation on their side when they have, relationships with their
Mhm.
distillery or their branding. They want to make sure that, they understand the concept of what it is to make tequila, because, that's a whole different animal.
Mhm.
But, yeah, so it's
Right.
just been a really great, just, um, journey, I guess, through it all.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in developing Hano, obviously you had the idea came because you saw the opportunity to use the agave Americana. And then when you were thinking about the brand and you alluded to a little bit to your heritage, and then, to this just the history of agave in Mexico, like what aspects of the brand were important to you, that the brand represent, so as you were creating this, that you wanted to make sure the rest of the world took away from it too.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because it all really starts with the name Hano. Hano is my nickname in my family in Mexico. And so when I was kind of
Mm.
creating this brand, I wanted to, find something that was unique, because I feel like everything else is copyrighted at this point. But, I
Yeah, it's hard to find a unique name that isn't
exactly. And
taken.
so I thought, well, okay, well, I've never heard anyone else have this name before, so I'm gonna go with it. And
Hmm.
so, if you're gonna put your name behind it, whether it's your nickname or not, I wanted to I
Hmm.
wanted to have
Right.
integrity behind it. And so when we went down this path of agave Americana and native U.S. agaves, which there's like more than a dozen native U.S. species, by the way, and we're hopefully going to make
Hmm.
more spirits from different types of agave in the future. But I
Yeah.
think when I was imagining, the creative side of this brand with my partners, we were really, really wanting to express our pride in the California culture, the Chicano culture that we have here in California. I wanted us
Hmm.
Californians to have a beverage that we can all relate to say, this is ours, almost like when you
Hmm.
see a bottle of wine from California in another state or something, like an
Right.
homage back to it. And it's been really important for us to do it with integrity, to do it with a way
Hmm.
that feels like it's, right, for us,
Hmm.
we live and breathe this every day. We want other Californians, to feel like they can belong to this brand, because as we go along with this agave spirit brand, we're also noticing that it's not just the spirit that we make that defines what Hano is to the California agave space. We're
Hmm.
expanding into different types of agave products and spirits that I feel like are going to not only diversify what we do, but it's more about the cultural drive of the brand that is becoming
Yeah.
more important than how, or the spirit is always going to taste. We know that the
Hmm.
agave spirit is always going to have the quality behind it, but what could we be doing more for, like I said, the cultural part of this that feels relatable to people in this space.
Hmm. Yeah. So, beyond the beverage, really creating that pride and that emotional connection to it. And do you see it as, the kind of beverage where it's, like, I mean, I'm sure your answer is going to be everywhere, but like at the like a, family get together, or like a family dinner in a restaurant, like where does it fit in the spectrum of accessibility in terms of price point and location where it's available now?
Exactly, and that's the proof of concept that we're going through right now. Like sometimes the numbers and the data almost have to drive what we're doing now and how we're able to pivot in the
Hmm.
future. And so, right now we're on the shelf for $120, and and it's not because we think we are some really high end luxury brand that is only
Hmm.
marketing itself to the elites of the world. It really is because the labor and
Hmm.
production cost is so high. Uh,
Yes, is that
yeah,
much?
so
Yes.
we need to obviously input that in our costs, but it's also why we're trying to diversify as well, because almost
Hmm.
on the opposite side of it, when we started with 120, it's almost like we had to earn that place on the shelf for someone to purchase it for 120.
Right.
So the quality had to be there. The packaging had to
Yeah.
be really nice. The story behind it, the
Hmm.
integrity behind the brand. And it's almost like now where the 120, I feel like, is more justified than it was in the very beginning. And so it's
Hmm.
great because now every time we come out with a product, with a batch of Hano, we could see it being out of the distributor's hands and, or our hands in 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, it's out there. People are
Yeah.
buying it. People sell out relatively quickly.
Hmm.
And so, not that we intentionally created a scarcity part of our brand, but in reality, it just happened that way because I think of the interest.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think with the expansion of what we're trying to do in the near future, I think what's going to be
Hmm.
really interesting is being able to offer different products at different price points based on
Hmm.
other uses of the agave that we have in current production that might be able to
Yeah.
help with, not always having a $120 bottle that maybe isn't being broken, or the bottle isn't being opened at a barbecue or something. We want to have a type of
Hmm.
California agave product at every place that we find, spirits being sold and consumed, right? So,
Hmm.
we love seeing our bottle at retail stores, at restaurants, but we also want to see it in different parts of the retail store and restaurants that maybe aren't being used. You know,
Hmm.
can we make products that benefit more the mixology culture, bartending culture, so it's more available than having to pour a $30 shot.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then what other parts of the cultural drive
Hmm.
can we implement that with the brand that other people, in the retail sector can use as not even just advertising or marketing, but as something like, oh, I never thought about using it like that. Why don't we do that?
Hmm. Right. Are you seeing the desire to have a lower entry point product come from like your own experience and research, or are you hearing that feedback from the retailers that they'd like to
I
see
think
that?
it's coming more from us. I don't. The retailers at this
Hmm.
point have an interest only because I think it's unique. It's not that
Hmm.
people are banging on their doors right now, going, "I must have that California agave spirit, and I must have it
Uh-huh.
now." We
Yeah.
are hopefully creating that demand by being
Hmm.
a brand, again, with a brand that has integrity, that people have a sense of possession with the brand, that I feel like
Hmm.
is the way forward. But I think on the other side, we want to see where this product works, not best, but at all. No one has come out with a moderate price point for a California agave spirit yet, right? I want to see what
Right.
that looks like when there is availability of agaves out there. No one really has
Hmm.
tried, in a scalable way, anything to do with RTDs or non-alc or low
Hmm.
alc or even liqueurs, mixers, things like that we're
Yeah.
so accustomed to getting from our distributors and at whatever price point. But I haven't seen anything in those spaces that feel local, that feel as local as someone trying to buy a California made beverage.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You have a lot of opportunity ahead of you with this. So it's going to be exciting to see what you do.
Yeah, we're stoked.
Good. Um, all right. So, two more questions that I have for you today. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about what have you done to market the product? So, you have, an awesome product, has beautiful packaging. How did you get it out there?
Initially, it came from a lot of our personal contacts. I think the
Hmm.
the the best way, I call it kind of like the agave roots, kind of build up, because we literally started from our own contacts in the retail scene, bartenders,
Yeah.
retail owners, just people that we knew were excited about what we were doing, and
Hmm.
just knew us as people, right? So they kind of knew us that we were good
Yeah.
for it, and we carried it in certain accounts. And then it kind of grew from there. And I'm really thankful for, the California Agave Council. I mean, it's a huge network now of people that are excited, and, they're asking for it
Mhm.
at their local retails. Social media was a good
That's great.
presence, but also, publication and podcasting and stuff like this has been super helpful, because I think it
Mhm.
solidifies the interest that people have. I think people, when they hear it or see it in a
Mhm.
publication, they feel like they can trust the product. It's not, either a gimmick or something that they've never heard of. Maybe, it's not just word of mouth. So I think just the
Yeah.
combination of that, you win an award or two, that also, kind of solidifies the trust in the brand.
Does
Yeah, it
help.
does. And right now, like, that's the whole thing is, in all honesty, we're still trying to navigate how we work on, building this, every day. But I think now if
Right.
I'm going to be more proud of anything with this brand, it's not just the fact that, we have adapted to make, an incredible spirit and helped, this California agave community, but also
Mhm.
that the brand feels like it's here to, that it's here on a more permanent basis, that it's not
Mhm.
a question mark, of whether they know us or not. It's just the fact that they've never had a California agave spirit. And if they have, we're one of them that they've had, and with good comments.
Mhm.
So yeah, we
Yeah.
don't spend any money in marketing. We've made a couple hats. We've done a couple shirts. It's not like we're out there, trying to be a bigger brand that we are. I think
Right.
we love to be face to face with people. We love to contact with people, and I think that
Mhm.
drives more, I guess, quote unquote, sales than trying to
Yeah.
perceive something that we aren't.
Right, right. Yeah. And your history in the wine industry, I'm sure, helped with making connections and the on the distribution side and retail side to open up those doors for conversation. So a lot of times it does go back to relationships, right? So very important in this industry.
Absolutely.
So my last question, so tell us, what has been your recipe to revenue for your business in this venture?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm still figuring it out, but I think the path to revenue is, you really got to understand what you are making and what it makes sense and what your business model will tolerate, as far as like
Mhm.
what your parameters
Yeah.
are of making revenue. It's pretty, cut and dry when it comes to making a spirit. Most of the time it's, you have costs, you have,
Mhm.
all of your costs, labor, all the way up to your packaging, your all your other fees. But then it's also, okay, what's your markup? Because that markup is going to keep I think your business with playing with its own winnings, as I call it, to make sure that the money
Yeah.
is using itself. And then for us, the interesting kind of variable is the scalability of this. I think that, I think with
Mhm.
other brands, of course, you want scalability. You want to build up, your whiskey, your gin, your, rum. But I think here it could be a factor of X, as you usually have with brands, that you want to increase. And we have a potential of doing way more X's to that, with the California agave spirit,
Mhm.
if the interest is there, we create that demand. And so, like I said, right now it's a proof of concept. We're showing the world that,
Mhm.
you can have a California agave spirit company. Our business model is adapting. We are looking for more
Mhm.
vertical integration. We're looking at what path we really want to take in the future, but also what our 5-year plan is, like anyone that does business models. But
Yeah.
and none of
Sure.
us, have a master's in any of this. We're producers. We're not always business
Yeah.
savvy, but as long as the company can sustain itself on its own 2 feet, I think that to me is the
Mhm.
win. And
Yeah.
seeing what we can do in the next 5 years with either our own organic growth, or if there's an injection of seed capital
Hmm.
or any kind of investors. I mean, that's a really interesting prospect that we never would have thought of 4 years ago when we started this. So,
Right.
yeah, we're just going to keep hammering, home, the integrity and the kind of brand culture that we're trying to drive. And, we're proud to say, we're now on, year 4, and we're still here, and we're
Yeah.
well respected, and we love our community. We have just as much, if not more, respect for the other producers and the other people involved in California agave, because they really
Yeah.
understand the fight. But yeah, if I was going to say anything to people wanting to get into the space, I think they just have to understand that it's not as linear as maybe another spirit can be. There's so many more
Sure.
ways of getting your whiskey brand out there, your gin brand, and it's a lot more saturated. Or even if you're importing a tequila or mezcal, but I think
Right.
if you're really passionate about the movement of California agave, it's a really great place to be, and it's a really tight knit culture. There's only a handful of actual producers, but there's probably 5 times
Yeah.
more farmers now to producers
Mm.
than that. At this point, probably 10 times the farmers than there is producers.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
the relationships that we have with people that are interested in the agave, world in California is really, really bright. So I would just
Hmm.
understand that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So find your community I hear you saying is really important to have that network that understands what you're doing and can be the support to help you move it along. So you actually have the product and you have, all the pieces that you need to
Yes,
succeed.
exactly. And I was just going to say too, like, it goes beyond the dollar for what we're doing, right
Yeah.
now, yeah, I'd love to see more going into like a retirement account, or seeing a lot more,
Hmm.
revenue driven. But because we are, strictly, based on the availability of agave right now in California, it's not a
Yeah.
always, the graph isn't always directly at a 45-degree angle, and so as long as people
Sure.
understand that all of us in this space are in this for the long run, this is not our retirement account, this is our future as producers,
Hmm.
as farmers. We are currently, farming those agaves in different parts of the state, because we want to see what those native US species are doing in the different parts of the state for
Yeah. What
terroir.
it does.
Right,
And
that doesn't
right.
come either free, comes with a helping hand with friends that have land, or agave
Hmm.
species you have. So you can do it in a way that isn't capital intensive, but it does take your time, and it does take your
Hmm.
your energy, and any
Sure.
resources you think you have. And then the other time, when you're not in the field planning your farming, you're out there producing, or you're out there marketing yourself, or you're having a great time on a podcast
Hmm.
like this with you. So I think that's what I would definitely pass on to other folks.
Yeah. Yeah. Wearing many hats along the way is pretty comes with the job.
Exactly.
So where can people find you if they want to try some of your spirits and if they want to follow along on your journey
Yeah, I think the
online?
best place to direct people is our website, janospirits.com. Has
Mhm.
some kind of some locations as to where we have our bottles either sold or were sold. You can check us out on
Mhm.
Instagram, Jano Spirits, um, or at Jano Spirits. but
Yeah.
but then I'm usually available through both, if they want to reach out. There, I'm always happy to communicate, or answer any questions, or direct people to where they can get those answers.
Yeah. Excellent. And we'll put links to all of your locations in the description. So be sure to look them up online, follow them. If you're in a store and you happen to come across a bottle that hasn't been sold out yet, definitely get your hands on it. So thank you so much for joining me today, John. It was so great to hear your story and excited to see what the next step is in this.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Leah.
Thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
so much.
All right. We'll
Talk
talk
soon.
soon. Bye.
Bye.